Are people just overly hating on the Electric State because it has stars that people are just kind of prone to hate on the internet, whether that's Chris Pratt, whether that's Millie Bobby Brown, whether it's the Russo brothers? Like, these are people that are always targeted for online hate, that have just like a fervent fan group that is like there to tear them down. Like, I am curious if this movie's actually as bad as people say. With that said, I've heard this movie is god awful. I've heard they overspent on this movie. I've heard it just is not coherent. I'm about to sit down and relax and watch this movie. So I'll be back in a few hours to give my review and thoughts on the Electric State and answer the question, is this thing as bad as people say it is?
2 hours later.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, this is a pretty bad movie. Let's talk about the Electric State. And you may notice I changed outfits, as I do with a lot of Netflix movies or TV shows. I ended up watching this on the treadmill. I just decided, I'm like, you know what? They decided not to put this $320 million film in theaters. That means they're okay / signing off with the idea that people are watching this movie on their phones / iPad, which is how I watched this movie. I had it on my iPad, propped up on the treadmill, and it's a totally normal way to watch this movie that doesn't require any form of brain cells to watch. Like, watching this movie, I kept having this thought of just like, wow, this movie is just like not successful in anything it is trying to achieve. And you don't need to have a brain cell to watch this movie, because you've seen this movie 1,000 times. If you've ever watched a movie before, specifically if you've ever watched a sci-fi movie before, you've seen all the beats in this movie. This movie is kind of this weird mix between Ready Player One and E.T., I suppose. But like, this movie makes Spielberg's Ready Player One look like Schindler's List. Like, it is such an incomprehensibly weird movie. And, you know, typically, like, before jumping on this, I like typically try to like write down my thoughts on the movie, like try to have a cohesive like narrative / script that I'm following for a review. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that for the Electric State. Like, that would be putting far more work / thought into it than the screenwriters put into making the Electric State. Like, it is a movie that is like so nothing. And the weirdest thing about it is, besides the fact that this movie cost $320 million, which is just like, how, like, where did that money go? Like, the other thing is like, how many famous people are in this movie? And like, I'm not going to really recount the plot of this movie. Like, I'm assuming if you've seen this review, like, you're already like vaguely familiar with how bad this movie is, like, or you've seen it yourself, or like you've just heard enough through osmosis to like know that this movie is a disaster. I'll get into it a little bit, but like, what I actually want to talk about is the performances in this movie, which, just before I get into this is my shameless plug. I always have to do this. Make sure to subscribe to this channel. But the acting in this movie, like, I'm going to try off the top of my head pointing out everyone who was like incredibly famous is in this movie. Obviously, this movie stars Millie Bobby Brown, who is the subject of Drake's love, I guess, and also the star of one of the biggest projects that Netflix has had to date in Stranger Things. Like, they get her to star in it. Makes sense. She's a Netflix actress. Like, makes sense that she's leading one of their premiere films. Chris Pratt in this movie, which again makes sense because this is directed by the Russo brothers. Like, they're reuniting Chris Pratt and the Russo brothers. Like, those connections make sense. Then it's where you start getting down the line of cast. The opening scene of this movie, which I'll talk about right now, like, it's like this kind of like flashback of like what transpired in this like great war. And like, the war is essentially like the robots created by like quite literally Walt Disney, which like should be kind of a funny referential to the now in studio filmmaking. I don't know if the movie is intentionally going for that, or if it's just like not aware that's the joke, but like it shows you this flashback between this war and the leader of this war. And for some reason, this movie is told entirely through the 90s. I never understood exactly why. But the leader of this war, it's like an alternate history where the robots rebel, and the leader of the robots is Mr. Peanut. Like, legitimately, like, the peanut guy. And, like, in this movie, he's voiced by Woody Harrelson. And there's, like, quite literally, like, Forrest Gump level archival, like, CGIing, like, Bill Clinton shaking hands and making, like, peace accords with Mr. Peanut. And, like, I'll admit, like, for the first 5 to 10 minutes, I'm like, okay, like, this is kind of so campy absurd that I'm kind of digging it. Like, this is so batshit crazy that I'm kind of in on it right now. And so, like, that was kind of what I was expecting this movie to be. And it just, like, isn't that. And it's, like, just nowhere near as fun as that, like, opening scene, which actually looks pretty good as well. Yeah, no, this movie's a weird one. Like, Woody Harrelson's in this movie. Like, Giancarlo Esposito, man, I feel so bad for him. He is being asked to play the exact same character over and over again. Like, I get it. He's so incredible as Gus Fring on Breaking Bad. Like, he's great as the villain in The Mandalorian. Like, do we need to, like, ask one of our great actors to just do that role over and over again? Like, recently, like, he was in Captain America Brave New World, like, doing that role. He's been in The Mandalorian doing that role. He's been on The Boys doing that role. He was in the film Abigail last year doing that role. Like, it is just time and time and time again where we are just asking Giancarlo Esposito to play this role. Stanley Tucci's in this movie. I hope he got a nice paycheck. I'm trying to think who else. Anthony Mackie, Oscar-nominated actor, 2 times in a row. Oscar-nominated actor. Coleman Domingo's in this movie. George Costanza, Jason Alexander, like, is in this movie as, like, the foster dad. Like, Mrs. Incredible. I'm blanking on the actress's name right now. Helen Hunt. Is that correct? It's something like that. But, like, she's in this movie as well, and, like, none of them are, like, developed. Like, I think I read, like, somewhere that, like, Rob Gronkowski of the Patriots is, like, in this movie. Like, what is happening? Like, oh, Ke Huy Quan, also another recent Oscar winner, is in this movie. Like, it's actually, like, insane the amount of star power this movie has and how none of them are asked to do anything with it. I wouldn't quantify any of the performances as good. I think some are more successful than others. And by more successful, I mean they came away from this movie not looking awful. I think Tucci gets away with it. Like, Tucci gives something to this movie. Like, and it's very clearly he's phoning it in, but, like, at least, like, he has a presence in this movie, I guess. I'm trying to think who else comes off, like, fairly well. Like, Woody Harrelson kind of just has a memorable thing in this movie, like, as the voice of Mr. Peanut, but, like, I don't know if it's, like, great acting by any means. Like, Millie Bobby Brown's bad in this movie. Like, and this is saying it as someone who, like, doesn't really have any form of relationship with Millie Bobby Brown. Like, I didn't watch Stranger Things. I haven't watched any of her Netflix movies like Enola Holmes. Really, my only awareness of her is through the Godzilla versus Kong movies. Like, I don't really have a judgment on her. She's really bad in this movie. There's a scene at the very end where she's asked to deliver a monologue, and, like, it's so cringeworthy. Like, it's so tacked on. It's so poorly written and executed in this movie. Like, you almost just, like, have to wonder if it's a joke. Like, is this, like, the Russo brothers, like, kind of pranking people where they're just like, hey, like, we can get Netflix to give us $320 million and just, like, give it to all our buddies and friends. Like, that's kind of what this movie feels like, where it's almost like Laundering, where it's just like, hey, like, we can make sure our buddies get great paydays. Like, and that's what I hope. Like, ultimately, I'm like, if Stanley Tucci's going to be in this movie, I hope Stanley Tucci got paid well, like, ultimately. Chris Pratt's in this movie. He's essentially asked to play the Star-Lord archetype that he's kind of known for doing. I've always kind of been a Chris Pratt defender. I typically like him in movies. I don't think he's bad in this movie, per se, actually. Like, the energy that he's given, like, was okay. Like, again, essentially, like, I like the Chris Pratt mold of what he does and the shtick. Like, it just kind of works for me. Not like in anything successful in this movie, but like in the sense of like, okay, you're asking for this type of character to kind of do the jokey humor that he does in Guardians of the Galaxy. Like he can pull this off enough for this movie that asks nothing else of him. Like besides that, everything else in this movie is just like bizarrely overlong, muddled. Like I don't understand what was happening most of this movie. That's like a true thing. I was watching this movie and I'm just like, wait, so what's going on? Like we have this whole story of like there was this war between the humans and the robots. Something happens and there's this peace met, and then like the humans are able to like put themselves in the body of the robots and like use their brain to like to be completely dueling at the same time. Like half of your brain can be on like leisure and the other half of your brain is working, and like you can send like your thoughts or mind or however it is to like different robots that are appearing in this movie. Like I didn't get that. Like, and again, it's, I think this idea that, and this isn't spoiling it, but like as all these movies about technology and robotics and like movies about the digital age are, it comes to the same conclusion, like, which is just like, hey, like, just like, don't like be on your phone as much. Don't be on your computer. Like, it's kind of what this movie is also as well, where it's just like, okay, like that's what we're doing here. Like, I don't really understand that. Like, I don't understand, like, again, why this movie exists in the form that it does. Like, there's no real good action sequence in this movie. Like, the thing that's like really confusing me is like, where did the $320 million like go? Like, it's not on screen. Like, yeah, I mentioned like there's a cool enough opening action sequence with shows kind of the flashbacks of the war. Like besides that, and maybe it's just like the fact that I like just don't remember it, but like there's not that many action scenes left in this movie after that. Like I guess it's maybe just the CGI of the robots that are prevalent in this movie. Like I guess in theory that could be it, but yeah, no, it's a really weird experience watching this movie and just thinking like, oh yeah, like our most recent Best Picture winner was made on a $6 million budget. Like imagine had those resources Netflix had been using had been distributed that way. And I think that's why a lot of people, a lot of the online discourse that you're seeing about this movie is so overly negative. And because here's what I want to say. Watching this movie, I never had the thought of, oh, this is so bad, I need to turn it off. Like, I never really had that. This movie clocks in a little less than 2 hours. I think it's 2:08 is what it's listed on, but it has like 15 minutes of credit. Like, I never felt myself being like, this is so painful. Like, this is torture. It's never that. Like, this movie isn't torture to watch. It's very uninspired. It's very cliched. It's like bizarre in what it's doing, but it's not like bad to watch. But I think why there's so much negative discourse is just like the landscape of Hollywood where it exists now and like what Netflix stands for. And like, you know, the fact that like guys like Scorsese or like even Sean Baker, who just won Best Picture and Best Director with Anora, or like any of these like really talented directors have to fight like tooth and nail to get a budget. And then like this movie gets 330. Like, I think that's where the frustration comes from with people. And they see this movie and it's just like, oh, this is where Netflix priorities lie. And that's a pretty compelling argument, because watching that, I was like, yeah, like this is in line with the schlock Netflix makes. This is like in line with Atlas last year with J-Lo. This is in line with, I think it's called Red Notice. Is that the Rock movie with Ryan Reynolds and Gal Gadot? Like, this is in line with those types of movies like that. This exists with them. And like, that is kind of a fundamental issue with where we exist now, where it's just like, hey, we should be allowed to expect more from our creative overlords, our studio overlords, but we can't. Like, this is like what they seemingly are going to make. Is this movie going to be popular? Like, that's a real question that I have thinking about this movie. Like, is this movie going to find an audience? I can't really say it is. Like, I think it'd be kind of weird if it did. Like, who's like loving this movie? Like, who is the demographic for this movie that is just like, fuck yeah, Electric State? Like, gonna rewatch that. Like, is it just like young boys, like 12 to 18 range, who are just like, fuck yeah, we're gonna watch the new Chris Pratt movie. Like, Millie Bobby Brown's like so sexy. Like, is that it? I don't think that's the demographic per se. But it's like, it feels a little younger than that. Like, it does feel like maybe this is closer to like that 7 to 10 range, but also like this movie's PG-13. And also like, this movie's not good. Like here's the thing. Like, and maybe I'm giving the youth too much credit, but like, there's a lot of movies like The Electric State, including like a movie that I'm not necessarily fond of either, but it's a very popular book and it came out recently as a movie, like a movie like Ready Player One, like, which I think is an incredibly flawed movie. But like, again, next to this movie, it's Citizen Kane. Like, it's so much more masterful in everything that it's trying to do. Like, Steven Spielberg is such a better director of visual effects and all of that. Like, that's the thing where I'm thinking about this movie. I'm just like, I don't even think it's going to get that like young boy audience that I'm referring to, because like, they have other and better options. Like, so ultimately we're left with this like really weird artifact of a movie. And from my understanding, this is based on a graphic novel. This is also the sucky thing, because like, this is going to be a lot of people's introduction to this graphic novel. And like, I'm not going to read the graphic novel after seeing this movie. Like, why would I? Like, unless people tell me so much that it's like, I need to read it. Like, this doesn't encourage me to go seek it out. Like, usually the best adaptations end up making me want to go out and read the source material. Like, you want to engage with it. I don't want to engage with this world anymore. Like, Mr. Peanut is in this movie. Like, that's a real thing that happens. Like, what? Like, what is happening here? Yeah, no, nothing's like successful with it. This is kind of like just like a movie that, like, just like the review that I'm doing, doesn't have a point, doesn't really have an end point, isn't really working towards much. And it's just kind of there. Like, I don't know what else to say. This movie exists. It's taking up Netflix hardware, I guess. Like, and it's bizarre. Like, I don't know. Like, why are the Russos interested in this? Like, this is such a bad career path post Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. And now you have The Gray Man, which, I'll be honest, The Gray Man looks better than this movie. The Gray Man's a bad movie, but at least like, I understood what they were trying to do, even if it's very mediocre at what they're trying to do. That movie at least has memorable performances in what Chris Evans is doing. I don't think it's a great Chris Evans performance. In fact, it's probably more bad than it is good, but at least he's trying to do something in that movie. No one's really trying to do anything in this movie. And for the Russos, I'm watching it and I'm just like, what are you guys like interested in with your career? Is it just like signing on to projects that are going to get you like huge paychecks, which again, like, cool for you. Like, you're about to make the next few Avengers movies. Like, I hope, like, ultimately, like, you've made some of my favorite Avengers / MCU movies. Like, I hope you can help bring Marvel back to its like former glory. And like, if that's really like where you guys are maxing out on, like, if that's really like what you guys are best at, and like, that's what you're suited for, then just like stay there and just help run Marvel. Cause like, you guys don't have it as filmmakers otherwise. Like, there is nothing suggesting to me that post their MCU career, they have anything worth giving to Hollywood as directors. That's a tough thing to say, but you make The Electric State and you deserve the shit you get. So that's the situation we're here. That's what I'm thinking. And The Electric State, I'm kind of questioning myself. Does Mr. Peanut get this movie to 2 stars? Mr. Peanut shakes hands with Bill Clinton. I don't think I've emphasized that enough. Like, What? Like, he shakes hands with Bill Clinton for peace accords. Like, that in its of itself was better than anything that I watched during the Sacramento Kings game today when we played the Suns. Like, that is arguably better than the 2.5 hours I would have spent watching the Kings lose to the fucking Suns. 2 stars? Like, is that too generous? I don't know. Tell me. Let me know. Am I being too generous? I don't know. Thank you anyway for watching this video. I hope you subscribe. We'll be back for a few more reviews. What do I have coming? I know I have The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie review, hopefully coming out soon. I want to go see the new Soderbergh movie with Michael Fassbender and Blanchett. Hoping to review that soon. And I have a lot of other stuff coming for you soon, including a Snow White review. So thank you so much for watching this video.